mean, even some of the collective kids may be like, hey, we want to find out, but we have a lot of them. I know.
Can you
So
say it differently? Do you know what I'm saying?
It's offensive.
It's offensive. So like he came up with this wine label called Filth, and it would just be interesting how he did the label, but he put like male parts on there, and it's just like, okay, now go to the next thing. What else can you say Filth? You know, go to the next
Okay.
thing. And he just,
Sure.
if you want to make a statement, make a statement, but what are you making a statement about? Do you know what I'm saying? So
Okay.
anyway, tomorrow.
All right. I'm around.
I know. Tomorrow I'm gonna like picking you up. Garland is in for that. He's on LA time. He wakes up at 10.
You're on Pacific time?
I noticed that this morning. I was
Yeah, so that's
running
yeah, so it's
2 hours behind you all.
2:30. On 2:30 time.
Yeah. Got 3 more hours before the presentation, right?
forget. Start on this one?
Yeah.
So delete it or just leave this up?
No, leave it.
Okay, but you're saying just skip through it. Yeah, just leave it there. Right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then it goes to this.
Yes.
Don't forget, people.
Is it past? Maybe we need to take this off.
We'll check it.
Can you find out?
Just do this QR
Yeah,
code.
hold on. Someone told me it was past.
No, it's like the 15th.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think it's 30 days before. Wait,
Hold on.
20 days before. But it's probably past.
What's that? To some extent, yeah. So the earlier the better before they get kind of X'd off. I'm getting there. Not as often as I used to. I've done this a couple of times, but it's been a while. Try to have fun with it. Oh, we got the lights going. Oh, they do? Like clockwork. I love it.
They are like out there right now.
So we got 10 minutes. What am I doing up here?
You're running a mile.
Yeah, in some other universe. Excusez-moi. Merci. Merci. Merci.
That's your classmates?
alaika ti kore iti kosam kinye di masan dakaro aina de nadi oti mariam bade walla ngai makati nasuru hamadun kate bakoy walla ngai makati ay nadi nani tarawar lenkum walla ngai makati ay nadi na pamante yobere kan hamrayitin makora makora nakunikahin tada tada suntakro Ifi million Himalan fi million nakun kahin tada ngamakora ikahin يبلغ زيكيا يا دا يبلغ منا دا دا توتالانيا تسكم تاني Hamakora ikahin
If you're not familiar with the Student Peace Initiative, they are located in the history department. The junior presentation will be out of this class, and then the social political class will be working on the peace conference. If this is something that's important to you, they do some really interesting things on campus. Unfortunately, it's an unpaid position right now, but we're working on it for the future to get it to be paid. But I believe Miles here? Miles did some work with this group last year, and it's just a really important thing for our university. And the juniors all submit abstracts to the conference, and hopefully get selected to present in the spring. And so we do the program, we design the program, and we print it for them. So anyone interested, Kalina would be love to talk to, and we may even invite them to a forum in the future to talk about what they're doing. So just reach out to her. I told her I would make this announcement for them, so if you're interested, yes, or come talk to me after if you need more information.
All right, so we're going to begin. I feel like we're missing a few people, but we'll get this party started. All right, welcome everyone. If you've attended a Loyola Design Forum session before, you know that I usually keep these introductions short, but today I have to do more for my mentor, Garland Kirkpatrick. So Garland, I'm not sure why it's taken me so long to invite you here, but I'm so happy I did. It gives me a chance to share with my students the story of how you became my mentor, which is also the story of why the Bachelor of Design degree at Loyola features a social, political, and environmental design course. A visual mentor is someone that not only inspires your work, your path, your journey as a designer, but also someone who cares about your growth as a designer. Can you choose a mentor, or have you found your mentor? I didn't really think much about my purpose as an undergrad student, but when I applied to grad school, I knew I really wanted to create designs that made a difference. I applied to all the strongest graduate design programs in the United States, and my first choice was Yale. They had a very profound conceptual program that challenges designers to think about the work they are making. As it happens, I landed at a different school, one that focused their critical lens more on formal studies. In my first year, I signed up for an elective course, an outlier, a somewhat unpopular elective. No disrespect to this class. The other students just didn't get it. In a sea of formally driven electives, type design, motion design, this class stood out. It was called Social Political Design, and it was taught by a Yale graduate, Garland Kirkpatrick. I still wonder how you managed to insert this class into that program.
I do too.
I know it wasn't created just for me. When I reminisce on my time at graduate school, it almost feels like the class was made for me because it planted the seed for my future as a designer and a design educator.
we made a fake website called Monsanto.org that mirrored the existing Monsanto.com website with text and images that show the effects of what this toxic company was doing to human health. We created stickers that had a toxic symbol on it and said, genetically altered by Monsanto. And we went to the grocery stores, putting these stickers in all the fruits and vegetables. Garland inspired us to do design outside the classroom, in the community. He convinced us to week paste social political posters about the presidential election in downtown Los Angeles. In the middle of the night, midnight, we were illegally putting up political posters with our teacher.
Teachers are persuaders, I guess.
I don't want to imagine what would have happened if we had been stopped by the Los Angeles police. Not only did Garland inspire us to stay out late to work on our community, but he convinced us to get up early to be with our community. He invited us to volunteer on Saturday mornings to work with kids in Watts, a neighborhood in southern Los Angeles. We spent many Saturdays working from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., teaching young black and brown kids how to use computers and how to design at the local community center. This kind of community work inspired me to become a teacher and find a place where I could give back. When I applied for a teaching job, I knew I wanted to be able to work in a place that wanted to make a difference. The mission statement at Loyola University states, Loyola University New Orleans welcomes students of diverse backgrounds and prepares them to lead meaningful lives with and for others, to pursue truth, wisdom, and virtue, and to work in a more just world. Because of Garland, I felt confident enough to start my teaching career at Loyola and build a design program that could make a difference. Garland's mentorship did not stop at grad school. Every time I hit a roadblock as a professional while building this design program, Garland was there for me. By then, Garland had transitioned to running the program at Loyola Marymount, and his words of wisdom were profoundly helpful because he worked at parallel universities, just in different cities. As the chair of Loyola Marymount Design, Garland wrote a letter of support for Loyola University of New Orleans to launch our professional design degree here in 2012, the Bachelor of Design. His support gave my proposal validity and weight. When I started working at Loyola, designers were only able to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. Students took 50 credit hours in design and 50 Common Core classes and 20 hours of electives. The new Bachelor of Design degree program allows students to take 72 hours in design, 39 in Common Core, and the rest electives. It was also important to me to make sure that the Bachelor of Design degree required a social, political, environmental design course which connects us to our purpose, embedded in the mission of Loyola, for a more just world, which stems all the way back to the outlier course I had in grad school with my mentor, Garland. Garland Kirkpatrick is someone whose work, influence, and life has always helped me connect the dots, challenging me to find a way to design for community, to move a design program forward, to live in a city and country that are affected by systemic racism and other isms, and to continue to create work in the face of those challenging for the more just world. With that, sorry, it was hard to get out. With that, please give a warm welcome to my mentor, Garland Kirkpatrick.
Thank you for that warm welcome. I didn't realize we did all that stuff back in the day. All right. Beautiful. And thank you for inviting me. This is wonderful to be here in our cousin schools of the Jesuit way, right?
Command L?
Yeah, Command L. I got you if you want. There we go.
There we go.
All right. Okay. So the broken peace symbol. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Daniela, because I've been doing this a while now. This is coming up on 30 plus years. And my working with you and Tuan and others have sort of kept me in this, you know, at a moment where it's absolutely critical. So we're going to digress and move around as much as possible. I wish I had more slides of those projects we worked on because they were very inspirational to me at a time when Not much of that was going on in design, but now it's here, thanks to you. All I can tell you is that the program that you have here is, you're in a great place right now. So, with that, I want to wish all of you peace. Ashe! 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 OG Helvetica Jones from LA is here in Loyola, bringing peace and love to you all the way to Congo Square. I say peace. I say peace. I say peace of mind. I say peace in our time. I say peace is here. And hold it dear. From Chicago to LA. From LA to South Africa. To New Haven too. And wherever it takes you. Ashe. I bring you peace. And go with peace as well. And keep that in your hearts, particularly in this time. That's my slide presentation. It may seem familiar. I go through countless iterations of things. Iteration in design is a principle. Doing things over and over and over and over and over again, and then doing it again and again and again. It is somewhat redundant, and one feels that, oh, well, I'll speak for myself. I feel like you're not moving forward, but backwards. You're sort of in this soup of elements, trying to appease, make, right? Make your living, make your way. And somehow art has to come back into this, and hopefully you know, that's what's keeping you in this. You know, you're not slaves waiting for opportunities. And the world needs you right now, more than ever. We've got less than 30 days, and the clock is ticking for the world that's coming. So wherever you sit, know that. So the title of my talk is called Autoethnographies, not graphics, not graphy. I guess I should back up and read this disclaimer that what you're hearing comes from me, not my institution, not nobody else, just me, myself, and I to you. And if I perturb you or stir you, that's probably a good thing. My hope and joy is that we find common ground. That is our gravitas. We still have gravity in spite of LA and AI. At least in my world, the world shakes. So, autoethnographics. Autoethnography is a highfalutin term that borrows from anthropology. It means my visual signature with graphis, to mark. All right? That is the definition of part of what we do as makers and signifiers. Seeing is the primary sense, even though my retina is sort of dulling at the moment, but you know, sometimes we make decisions on sight first and live with the consequences later. And our world is inundated with probably more than we can take in. How do you cope with that? Particularly when we have such efficient devices to take us out of this space that we're in. That's a real challenge to negotiate, as you're discovering. Red is a primary color. It is a cultural color. We find in every culture on this planet, and it has different meanings often, right? It means reverence, it means alarming, it means love, value, urgency. Red line. Anger, fear. And so as I start to talk to you about my work, I need to tell you a little bit about me, where I'm from, and the things that still persist, because where you're from shapes your vision. So that primary outlook comes from what you've seen, okay, and where you've been. And hopefully it will inform where you're going, if you are departing from that or imagining what's possible, because that's on you now, okay? It's on you. It's hard to do, but it's worth it. And we've been here before. It's hard to believe, but we've been here before. Redlining has shaped my life, okay? Where my family could live. So many things. The possibilities of a future. This is a statement from my mortgage. You know, it's been amended in Los Angeles. But there are restrictive covenants that were in place that said who could live where, what, and when, and for how long. In careful, litigious detail. That's the potency of words. That's your ability as typographers, as writers. You're well aware of that you are readers. So as you're doing your letter spacing and paying attention to what words are saying, think about that. Is there time to read and to know? I grew up in Chicago, obviously. A big hick town with deep color lines. And lots of prejudice, but respect. It was a melting pot, a crucible of all kinds of cultures, from immigration writ large. Interestingly, that's what makes Chicago a special place, even though it was deeply segregated on many levels. Where I lived was near a university. Yeah, not too dissimilar from this one. It was the University of Chicago, which was a nexus for people of all faiths, colors, and persuasions. And I was exposed to that. At some levels, that saved my bacon, because a lot of the people I grew up didn't make it. They did not make it. And Chicago was a turbulent place. On the left is a 6th grade collage that I made in a class about autobiography. On the right is a collage about duality. Duality of existence and being. W.E.B. Du Bois, right? And the souls of black folks talked about the veil that prevents the larger white supremacist society from seeing people who look like me in any other way. And it was a burden to try to reverse that, all right? Yet the complexities of that duality, we see it in every aspect of black life in the 60s and the 70s and the places that I grew up in, which were, you know, we had to make services, our own services. We had to make our own way through it in this narrow path of redlining. Did some amazing things as well. Those are the parallels. On the left side of that duality in the collage, we see a shattered Obama administration. The challenges of how we look at ourselves largely, and the promises that we make and try to keep. Change we can believe in. And I have lots of respect for public life, but it is boastful. Graphic design is a public practice. Although we are in the most visible of invisible fields, the designer is usually not at the podium talking about themselves, right? Unless they're pushing their work or looking at it. And it is an uncomfortable situation to speak through your work sometimes. But I have to tell you, it is one place where your voice can be seen broadly in broadcasting. So I'm going to show you some of those pieces that, for me, you know, I might think they're insignificant. If you can relate, beautiful. If not, think about how you might do that in your own ways and how to keep that alive. Because at the end of the day, if this becomes just a gig where you are pushing things around, and I know we're all looking for opportunities, but you also have an ability through your design process. All right? That's what I'm here to speak about. Not just the job of design. Hyde Park was a very interesting place to grow up in, right there in the University of Chicago. The Roby House was about 8 blocks from where I lived. I didn't even know who Frank Lloyd Wright was, but design was right around the corner. We had snowball fights on the cantilevering porch. And at the same time, the '68 convention was going on, and people were throwing down on Michigan Avenue like they anticipated this year, the Democratic Convention. Hell broke loose in the streets. So it was quite an interesting juxtaposition, this duality, this constant tension to negotiate, particularly if your politics are not an option, you know? They're skin deep for me. How could one not participate when you are identified by your melanin? My sister and I were coaxed into a white Christmas. As beautiful as that was, we were young and unaware of the unnatural fit on many levels. So the challenge of negotiating faith, expectation, the duties, beliefs, without reverence and tolerance of the other it has to happen. The challenge for me in my spirituality is not that I am one or the other. My beliefs are my own. The challenge is when I try to impose those on others. That's not my way. I wonder what yours is. More of this would come for me. I had a little bit of aptitude to get into a private school with lots of nudging, cajoling, and letters, and a little bit of scholarship money. But I would still be one of the only ones. We were the integrators, so to speak. The pushers, the one who had the expectation of succeeding, being the next generation to carry on. The pressure that was immense at a time when I needed nourishment. My first experiences with this new black culture that was emerging was through Black Life magazine, Ebony. Johnson Publishing was anchored in our city. The children of Johnson Publishing went to this school that I just got into. Jet and Ebony presented a view of life that seemed more representational in a world where we were absent. Nobody looked like me in the magazines or on television. We did see the racial traumas of the time. This was before I was born, but Emmett Till was from Chicago. And his mother bravely presented an exhibition at his funeral to show this heinous crime and the outcome of it, this beautiful child. So our mortality was right there, just outside the door. Fred Hampton, the Black Panther, made a film about him, I think. He was also murdered about 10 blocks the other way from my house. And his wife also set up an exhibition of how the Chicago police came in and riddled in the middle of the night, and riddled his apartment with bullets. These are the lucky Chicago checkered cops carrying his corpse away. Ghoulishly so. So I have a very long-lasting and deep-seated relationship with the police and this kind of authority as it's presented. Some of you might be able to relate to that. I know this is a very peaceful town, but There was also a lot of other things to look at. Interesting vernacular signage from the post-war period. Hand-painted signs. I fell in love with this idea of dimensional lettering. It's quite interesting. The logos of our time were Batman and Zenith, like on the television, right? That stuff is embedded in our memories. I didn't know what to call that, but I knew that in the comic books that I drew when I was that age, I tried to literally follow the characters and add color to them and tell stories with them. Perhaps that was the beginning of my design journey. To the bottom right, Harold's Chicken Shack. A black entrepreneur with 62 locations who drove around in a white Cadillac with a chicken on the hood. Branding 101, with the best fried chicken you'd ever want to get. Three levels of sauces, handed to you through a plate glass window at midnight. Very satisfying, but sort of dangerous points. Public television logos. Zoom, not Zoom. Not your current world on your screen and how we've negotiated with that. But the playful Zoom from Boston, Mass. 02134, still in my mind. The jingle, right? It penetrated my being. That fun, that association, the colors. That's what I wanted to do and be involved in. And my father's record collection. We had LPs in those times. I learned a lot from Reed Miles, probably one of the most creative typographers on the scene. A 9x9 jacket, right, with liner notes, but the typography and the imagery was brilliant, right? Trying to express the ideas in the music. Jazz came from your city, right? What would that look like? And then to the lower right, Emmett McBain. I think he's an AIGA honoree, the late Emmett McBain. I knew his son, and I actually got a chance to work with him later on in his life and his career, but didn't know about this was somebody who was just living right next door to him. Anyway, this all made an impression on me deeply. This is a jacked slide from that slide of 300 slides that you saw in the beginning. It covers the face of one of my first encounters with the Bauhaus. Robert Erickson on the far right, you can see it is sort of James Dean Do. And I apologize, this sort of blocked him out. Was the first graduate student at the new Bauhaus Chicago. How many of you have heard of the Bauhaus, the German design school? All right, yeah, probably. You're living with that legacy, for better and worse. Several immigrants left the Bauhaus. They were persecuted by the Nazis. Joseph Albers, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy came to Chicago. Albers went to Black Mountain College in North Carolina, and then on to Yale to found that program. Very creative being who had a lot of vision. Robert Erickson is sitting with Moholy-Nagy behind this cover, this German cover. His work is actually in this version of Wingler's Das Bauhaus. And beside him is Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus, the architect who started the design program at Harvard. It's quite interesting to see where the European immigrants landed. That was my first encounter. Robert Erickson started a design foundation at this school I went to. It was a John Dewey school. It was at the University of Chicago. In middle school, we made pinhole cameras and did all kinds of experiments. But art was a central practice in learning. And if you know anything about experience design, those of you who are going into UX, hence coming from user experience, although users are people, which is sort of the struggle to maintain our humanity in that discipline. The challenge is, or was, to play, to discover, to understand through experiential contact. Oh, I put my hand over a lighted match, it burns, so I draw a conclusion. We would do projects not burning each other down, but discovering. Discovery is a deep concept in design process. Your first phase of design, most phases and methodologies have 3 phases, just like a story, beginning, middle, and end. The first, design, right, is discover, an investigation and discovery of your client or the purpose or framing the question, all right, in a Socratic way. The answer is in your question, and you and your teammates will come up with that before you move to the next phase, right, of sort of its conceptual development, and it is iterative. You do it again and again until you get it right, until you draw a conclusion, right? And that becomes concretized into this synthesis. Anyway, blah, 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 but John Dewey and Moholy-Nagy met in Chicago. There's one crossing point where their philosophies jive, they gelled together. So it's quite interesting to see these concepts come together in a way. And of course, I didn't know who these people were as a kid, playing with pinhole cameras and having this experience and having the fun of my life, but it stuck. History was not important to me, it was immediacy. It was now. I want it now. I want it now, not later. I didn't care where it came from, okay? It's part of being a kid. And once you discover that things come from somewhere else, we discovered that, oh, these things have happened before. So history is important for that very reason, so we don't repeat ourselves. Or if we repeat ourselves, we hopefully do it in the right way, Gesundheit. My second encounter was with the Bauhaus, was in college. I went to Amherst College to study pre-medicine. My father was a physician. I'm also a junior, which is sort of a tragedy because you don't have your own name really, and you are destined to sort of follow in the path of that trough, right? Made a lot of things possible for us as a family, but the sciences and math were not weren't going to happen for me. I understood the principles and the parameters, but I'm a visual learner, okay? Anyway, I flunked out of Amherst and went back to Chicago to work at a civil rights law firm for a brief stint. That's another story, and we don't have time to go there, but I went back to finish, and I took an art history course as a survey, which introduced lots of broader ideas of visuality and ways of seeing the world. We had slides back then. We had to memorize a carousel of 350 slides to get through the class. That was the class. You didn't have no ring-a-ding and motion, okay? Your notes were taken in the dark. And if you failed, you didn't get your degree. So anyway, that was a liberal arts experience, migrating between subjects, carrying some knowledge to another, hopefully making a connection. You're getting the point here is that design is a collective collagen. It is the perfect prefix and suffix adjoined to anything. Any subject matter can be enhanced through design. Okay? I don't care what you call it. And this value, you see, is reflected as ubiquitous. So you are experts in the world. And the fact that you're at a university is even better because you can connect it to other subjects and enhance it, whether they're peace initiatives or what have you, or science, social sciences, or natural sciences, or communication, or dance and music. All subjects, I would say. I digress. So coming back around in this oblique, after flunking out, and sort of getting into this new major potentially, there wasn't a design program there. We had printmaking and drawing, and I did whatever I could to learn about it, but I didn't know what to call it. In the library was a very small chapter book called Interaction of Color, which spoke to me in some way at poetic level, with illustrations showing you how seeing worked. That stuck. Okay? It was the most articulate explanation of my life and what I wanted to do at some levels. No, I didn't make the connection to Robert Erickson, my former teacher, and those experiences. That was a book. And I did live in a world of books. I want to talk to you about your mentors and your teachers and what it means to be thanked and loved. Teaching is love. It is a mutual exchange. That's all that I can tell you. And I've had great teachers. And one experience that I had after, I'll speed ahead, after getting a job in New York and working in publishing and having an office in the Flatiron Building and trafficking a manuscript and discovering that, oh, the designer, or called then a graphic artist, had nothing to do with what was written in it. I said, oh, I want to do this other thing. So I went back to the new Bauhaus Chicago at the time, the Institute of Design, and I had my first typography class from a designer. His name was Robert Jensen. He was the former director of the Walker Arts Center. I'm not sure if any of these things are clicking with you, but he had a very profound way of doing things with words. That kind of literacy rung true to me. And he said, you need to go to Switzerland. And I said, me, a kid from Chicago, what about Switzerland? Backpacks and lederhosen and jawohl, you know, all right. So, okay, is it okay? I was so into design and how design finds you, let it arrest you. And this is part of the journey, is discovering your own way through this and embracing it and taking it with you as a part of you. The list of items that came in the mail from the Yale Brissago summer program, a 6-week intensive program of study in Brissago, Switzerland, in the Ticino Alps, of all places. It's pretty elaborate. So I bought the gouaches and the paintbrushes, and I'd never painted. I hadn't done any of this stuff. The glue sticks, the types of papers in my backpack with a small suitcase. Took the train across the Goddard Pass. I mean, it was a real journey to get there. But when I got there, we set up in a small kindergarten, small school. We all had small tables. We sat at those tables, and we had to start from the beginning. And what you're seeing now is the class picture of my group from that summer. And once again, I'm the only one. But it didn't matter. I was on my journey. And I had been well prepared for that in my earlier life. Yes, it is tragic, but at the same time, what an opportunity to stand, to go and to work with the gods of design in your history books. So I made that my mission, to try to have experiences with those primary sources in your history. And it's important to do that as much as you can so that you can carry that tradition on or interpret it and change it in your own way. There's Armin in the middle. And Armin could outwalk you in the hills of the Gadaro Alps. My goodness. I'd never walked so hard in my life. My knees were buckling by the time we got back. And then he would drink us under the table. Once I had a drinking game with Max Huber, who was another Swiss designer who loved jazz, and Armin said, come on over and sit down. Armin was a man of very few words. These guys were all about the speed of sight. It wasn't about talking. Like I'm doing, right? It was about making. Anyway, the grappa was extreme. His wife, Dorothea Hoffman, was also part of the program. there. Armin died 2 years ago, and Dorothea died this past year. Armin was 100 years old. Principles of graphic design are still referred to. Dorothea has in her own right as a scholar. I didn't have time to get slides of that together, but they were both parents, nurturing, generation of visionaries. What an opportunity. The surrogates. I'm fortunate to have these photographs. There we are. I had a little more hair on my head back then. I was closer to your age. There's the Bestine in the background. You don't do that anymore, but by hand. And Armin showed me how to make color out of mud. How to pull intensity from just in all kinds of ways that I hadn't thought of. This was my first design project with Armin. And this is my first critique with Armin. This is what we made. We painted colored papers and reconstructed graphics for a packaging product. Could have been about anything. Peace, could have been about your dog. Paul Rand gave another project about French artist Leger, you know. But the ideas were there. What can you express through color and form? Invaluable meditation that would change the way I see color entirely. My project is the one in the lower rung. And Armin said, so? That's all. It's not about a pat on the butt. This is about what do you see? There were a number of successes, and the students, my colleagues, were of varying levels. Some of them were professionals and had vast experience. I was kind of the newcomer in the room. But there was a place for me there. That was really reaffirming. I loved him. I digress. So instead of going to Basel, I had an opportunity to. It was a lot cheaper as a school, but it was expensive as hell to live in Switzerland. And what does a black kid from Chicago's South Side have to do with that? Right? But there was another opportunity at another university, Yale. And I applied to all the schools, the right schools and such. But I went to this one because of who was there. We had really the modern icons of the 20th century were there. Paul Rand, Edward Tufte, Alvin Eisenman, Bradbury Thompson, yada, 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 okay? They were all there, all the ringleaders. We were exposed to them. Robert Reed was my drawing instructor. Why is he important? Because Joseph Albers was cropped off because of my poor slide presentation. One of the masters of the Bauhaus, taking a lower position, actually created diversity at the Black Mountain College, hiring Jacob Lawrence, the painter who chronicled the Great Migration through the South. And he was hired as a professor there as well. Ruth Asawa, whose family was interned in California during the Second World War, discovered her prowess as a sculptor there as well. The linkage between them is because there's an intersection within modernism. There's a Venn that we have skipped by in the last round of eschewing the Bauhaus. We need to go back and delve back into. And it has a lot to do with identity and the value that brings. What you should know about Robert Reed was that he was an amazing teacher. That's Reed in the studio. I didn't know anything about this, but he was the heir apparent when Albers formed the Yale School of Art. When Albers was away, Reed was the boss. And Albers founded the graphic design program there, before Alvin Eisenman, actually. Quite interesting. His projects were way off the wall. There was no box to escape out of. You had to create your own shape. very conceptual, very unlike the drawing class he was teaching us when I was there. And he never spoke about this. He was a very modest man in that regard. I wish I had known this, but I learned this many years later. God damn it. So here's the logo part of the process. I do this in every talk that I give in recruitment, is that it's a test. Can you recognize these 5 signs? I'm going to ask you to call them out when I point to them, okay? Star of David, okay? Louder. This is church. This is how ingrained the things that you do are in our minds and consciousnesses, for better and worse. Whether it's a proxy war on the level of nationalism, or whether it's a pair of stretch pants that you bought for too much money. Right? That's the power of your art. Okay? Or the power of one aspect of it, to communicate. Jay Doblin was a professor of mine at the Institute of Design, and we looked a lot at branding and discovering what was essential in communicating. And color can say a lot, obviously. You got 100%. People are important too. So after I left Yale, I met this guy, Frank Nunu-Kwarko, who was a Ghanaian American designer living in New Haven at that time. And we met, I can't remember how we met, but we hit it off. And Frank was one of the best typographers I'd ever met. And we pledged to work together, and we did on several projects. At tooth and nail, we would fight and do all kinds of things with Franklin Gothic and such. Frank also went on to author probably one of the best monographs about Paul Rand. Are any of you familiar with this book? Paul Rand, Modernist Design, which chronicles Paul Rand's life and his lifestyle. And there's several, it's compiled with several interviews about his compatriots and colleagues. If you haven't, get it, take a look. But Frank, this has nothing to do with color beyond the color of the content, right? We worked on several publications together, fortunately. And this is back in the early 90s, straight out of school. We got awards for these things. But it wasn't for annual reports, it was for ethical subject matter and cultural content, which wasn't, wow, that's sort of new. And because design is the most visible of invisible disciplines, by that I mean the designer is behind the publication, you're not the poster in front of it. Didn't matter what I look like. Okay, this was a meritorious measurement of value within an industry. So, and for cultural content, not for profits. This one was around Martin Luther King and diversity initiatives at University of Michigan. This is another art catalog that got an award. So this is sort of early on. Okay, we're having a little bit of success here. We can sort of make a way for ourselves through our own agency. Okay, I don't have to worry about so much about the boardroom approval of my presentations, because that's where all of my classmates went. They all went to New York to work in financial services or to serve corporate interests. And that frustrated the heck out of me, to use a word. And I had to sort of reinvent myself. And Frank and I had to part ways after a point, and I decided, okay, I gotta head left. I'd head to the West Coast during the Rodney King era. George Halliday aptly captured the police ass-whipping. Funny to note that the last time I saw Frank, we were both detained by Ann Arbor police on their main street. So that's still lurking there, the shadow of the police. There'll always be there. But this atrocity set this town on fire. Okay, this is close to the time when I got to meet Daniela and started teaching at Cal Arts. But I thought, how am I going to put this all together? My identity, my experiences, my education together. Helvetica, okay, the Spartan German typeface with many weights and such, that spoke about Joan, the ordinary person, and Cleopatra Jones, okay, the expression of a heroine, okay, in juxtaposition, a heroine of our time. Behind that, you see a lexicon that I've developed over the years that I've used in projects. But things were happening, and I had sort of accepted that I was not going to be doing corporate work at all. I was going to do work that was antithetical to that, if I did anything. And I wasn't going back to grad school. So I was doing a lot of teaching back then. And Lorraine Wild hired me, fortunately, to teach foundation, and I stuck around for 12 years at Cal Arts and sort of rebooted. So I can't take full credit for social design because Victor Papanak, the theorist, taught a class like that back in the 60s. So we resurrected that aspect of connecting design and society and the problems of design, how design could solve the problems and discover the problems. This was the first project that I did under Helvetica Jones around the same time. James Byrd was a black man who was lynched behind a truck in a Texas road along 3 miles of Jasper, Texas. His body parts were strewn across the pavement. His family lost him. That's James Byrd. These tragedies were happening in the world. How do I connect my art, my process, to recognizing, memorializing, digesting this, the psychology, of processing the psychology of this heinous world that we live in, these tragedies. Below that is an image of the Brooks, the famous slave clipper, which shows the tuna-like packing of slaves and their transition in the Middle Passage. And so on the left is the poster that I created, over 6 foot long, silkscreen. And surprisingly, I did in one pass. But it had the human scale, and it connected an informational level with the texture of the road. And it was cathartic for me. This was what I was aiming for. I got some awards during that time. So I was getting that affirmation that, okay, you still have a leg in this, even though you're going another way. And the work looked like this, right? Asymmetric typography. We did our typesetting using CompuGraphic machines, and we did keyline and paste ups, and using a process of cut and paste that you're probably not aware of, but are starting to rediscover. Because you had hand in the game. It was tactile. It wasn't a swipe. Okay, it was tangible. Another conceptual piece involved the collaboration with the artist Kim Yasuda, who cut shards of rugs into topographic configurations to make a landscape, to tell the process of family stories in her life. So the collaborative aspect came back into the work and was very essential. Another project, I'm sorry these are so poorly reproduced, but they're the only reproductions that I have. A publication insert for a San Francisco magazine called C, which was very popular at the time, but they offered artists an opportunity to make these, you could call them illustrations, or we used to call them page-specific installations because we were trying to recreate the experience of the art installation while also dealing with the sequencing of pages. And for me, the idea was to deconstruct the book. So you can see images ran through the seams to tell a story on a couple of different levels about the Japanese internment of her grandmother. These got awards. These were recognized. This was sort of an epiphany. A lot of this kind of work was happening at this time. Art and design were a lot closer. I have my limits to the deconstructive aspect, and I was not an empty formalist, as Ed Feller might say. Those of you who remember who that is. But Ed and I collaborated on things too, which was quite fun. Victor Margolin contacted me, the late design historian from Chicago, while I was teaching at Cal Arts, and invited me to, well, why don't you design a cover? He was very interested in nurturing black designers at that time. He hosted the first convention of black designers in Chicago. I was living in California and couldn't afford the trip, but just to note. And so my approach was to say, you know, there was a flag controversy going on in South Carolina. And white designers should know about this. This is a pressing matter of our time. Design Issues was an academic journal that was read by a lot of people. It was published out of MIT. So it's a big deal for me. And so what I'm going to show you are a couple of the contact sheets of the models that we used to set that up. And then you'll see the final outcome. So on the left is my dear friend Gunnar Swanson, who offered to pose as the white antagonist. And on the right is Arnold Holland, another designer who went to, I think he went to VCU, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but there we are in the studio discussing the project. And Josh Caffrey was the photographer at that time, who made the images, excuse me. And so the cover became this multi-level piece where you had to engage the front and the back of the book. And it's hard to tell whether this is about unity or discordance. The front cover shows in the silhouette a confrontation within the silhouette of a black male. On the opposite side, deconstructed flag with the shape of the African continent. Also, a white male facing this black silhouette. But when they're open, both are facing in the same direction. So where's the opposition? We're looking in the same direction together. So it was an interactive piece. Okay. You had to handle it, turn it around to understand it. That was fun. That's the game. I'm also happy that the little work that I've done has taken on a life of its own at some levels. These are captured in an article in print, but it was an opportunity to make a statement. The People's Graphic Design Archive, even. Lulu's archive picked this up. I was happy to see that. There's a place for your work in the world. Okay? And it's to see it in the world in operation. Many of you have already experienced this, or beginning to. It is thrilling. These are your babies in the world, your children. This was a collaborative project with Self-Help Graphics, also silkscreening, for a social action that involved gentrification of the Figueroa Corridor, which was being black and brown families were being eschewed from that area by USC and others, developers. And so the idea was to create a series of silkscreen posters through the Center of the Study of Political Graphics, which I'll talk about in a moment. And these got picked up. These found a place. This is in probably 50 different collections of academic museums and archives. The idea is the layering of skin becomes a black and brown solidarity poster as the layers, the dimensional type resolves into this lockup of the hand. At a time when black and brown weren't talking much. these little projects have sort of gone out into the world. Jihad was based on a joke that Robin Williams told that resonated with me about the sort of cowboy politics of George Bush during the Iraq War. Yeehaw! So the alliteration is captured in a sticker that became a poster that we used in the protests downtown. The banners. This took on a life of its own. It got picked up in Milton Glazer's book, but it also showed up with Avril Lavigne and Richard Linklater's film, Fast Food Nation. So it's quite interesting. Around the same time, I was also doing graphic design work for the Center for the Study of Political Graphics. Am I talking too long? How are we doing? I tend to do that. Am I rambling on too much? We got 10 minutes, okay. So, the Center for the Study of Political Graphics has 90,000 posters about issues, social issues from around the world, and it is an amazing place because they're shown in salon style, which means we see these posters collectively, and they resonate over time, and the history carries on, and the pictures tell the story. I've been fortunate enough to do publications with them, design their logotype, and to also produce posters of varying kinds. If there were more time, I could show you their website and such, but the work's out there. Then Oscar Grant was murdered, right, on the Oakland Transom. And so I also published an irregular newspaper which tried to speak to those matters as well as amplify sort of the statistics of the time using QR codes and quotes by either social critics. In this case, we have Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous state that talks about a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. The QR code leads to that speech. Proportionally, I'm representing the disparity within $1 for warresisters.org. How, you use QR codes. This was a while back though, but what an efficient way of communicating an idea and amplifying it. This Protect and Serve used the same principle. If you zoomed in on this, you would actually see via YouTube the police brutalities, the unfortunate executions, the story, behind print, using this iconography. Killing Kindly does this in a different way. There was a stay in the execution of capital, the use of capital punishment, the execution of people by a lethal injection. The ruling has come back, but this poster tried to memorialize this as well. So these subjects are here. It's been quite interesting to see them picked up in traveling shows. This exhibition did a comparison between this work and the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, who I spoke about earlier. His statistical graphics around the migration of African Americans and their successes in Atlanta. These hand-drawn posters and such. What an honor. Emory Douglas, the Black Panther Minister of Culture, was in the show, and Chaz Mavion Davies. The posters from these centers are sometimes trafficked in museum collections, so it's been interesting to see these show up in Switzerland at the E-Museum. This was quite an honor, a piece about sexual politics. The community newspaper, Changelinks, which is ubiquitous in Los Angeles. I did the logotype, and sometimes you make things and you send it out of the world and they sort of do other things with the rest of it, but the sort of shifting idea of Poplar as a Gothic typeface was quite interesting. Our work at Watts, designing the Day of the Drum Festival, led to other work through the Department of Cultural Affairs, et cetera, et cetera. We did political campaigns for both rounds of the Obama administration. Daniela participated in this one, postcard campaigns. That we wanted to believe this time, that things were going to come through. on the Cafe Bolivar gallery. The second time around, we did lawn signs. He didn't get the message. There was a bailout for the corporations. And so in Occupy Day 6, my partner, Rob Billings, and I set up glassine tents and laminated posters, which there's Rob there boastfully, but you know, the police shut it all down. Film posters from the Netherlands, you know, you communicating and collaborating with people elsewhere is so much more possible because of the mediums that you're using. A political, racialized thriller, that was the poster for it. A recent campaign for a one-person show which looked at really the wall of moms, Resistor. We have copies of these somewhere around. You'll have a chance to see them, I think. Indigenous, and Blake, Jacob Blake, who was beaten and shot by the police and still lived, became subject matter for these pieces right around George Floyd. What bookends in a turbulent time? I'm also in love, so there's my website. Okay, yeah, I need help. Who's going to help me out? The idea is to be too busy to need a website and print, but my fetish with books began very early in Chicago, all right, and also working in New York. So I got the chance to work with galleries and museums in a very competitive environment. Whiteness tries to recreate the Jim Crow signs in stencil, the page. The gallery tried to recreate the sort of white superiority of gallery spaces through an art museum. Roger Kuntz's monograph, again, redesigning type, sort of conformed to the cover, carrying from the outside in. I believe the books are like films. That sort of transitional area becomes almost a glorious opportunity to sort of indulge in the content, collecting on the edge, et cetera, et cetera. This is not an ideal way to look at this stuff on screen. Yeah, it's writ large, but I couldn't carry these things with me on the plane, sorry. They're out there somewhere, believe me. This got an acknowledgement, best kept secret, et cetera, et cetera. Current project, we'll see if it goes through, about black photography in Chicago, which is more closer to the bone. A lovely so real, through the Art Institute of Chicago. The COLA projects, the City of Los Angeles offers artists grant money, untethered, to produce an exhibition of their choosing, and so the design, I got a COLA award at one point, and they invited the designers to come back and to design the catalogs for that time. These are different ones, using photography and color and such. The exhibition graphics sort of create an environment around the event. Here's the most recent one. I didn't get a chance to get to the other pieces because I wanted to get here, right? This is a poster for my social design class that Tuan Phan created. Brilliant silkscreen overprinting. You know, you guys are so much better than me. You make me look good. But the 5 or 6 of us, this was the launch of that class. And I show this every time and everywhere I go because of its meaning. It's sort of the challenge of our privilege challenge. Our work at Watts together, Daniela, during the reconstruction of the towers. And these kids had marginal gang affiliations, but would come and we tried to rebrand the towers on the left using a 256K computer on the right. Their type skills rivaled the graphic design work that I was seeing at Cal Arts. So it would be a nice pair, but my goal at that time was to get these kids to come to Cal Arts. What would that have been like? To escape the lives that they were in, we would find bullet casings around the Butler trailers, etc. I'm not going to over-romanticize that, but Jan van Toorn, my late mentor from Holland, who really introduced me to the idea of a social practice and the forces that shape design in our world, the political and economic dimensions that really have created the world that we are in. he was so aware of that, such a literate male. He came to visit us, and we spent a lot of time in LA looking at the project. Here are some of the students on the street with their black and white Holga cameras. There's a lot of photography, documentation of those environments that each of them have gone on into their own careers. Gotten MFAs, some are working at corporations and in their own lives. They had an opportunity to paint murals on the Butler trailers behind the building. I was looking for a photo of you, my friend, but I couldn't dig it up. But there's a sample of the camera, the Holga camera, this sort of black and white pinhole camera. Plastic, it's like a Lego camera. Anyway, Carol Wells from the Center of the Study of Political Graphics really checked that site out and the work there. It is one of the few repositories for this kind of work internationally. But she spent a lot of time with us. Student lexicons, a lot of the work now you're going to see is from LMU, your cousin school, and the emphasis of really dealing with the dichotomies in iconography. So projecting the idea first before over-stylizing it. And we work in a computer lab. So my goal is to not be on the computer, to draw on the computer, to collage and such. The projects are anchored in the community. On the right, an experimental typography class that dealt with re-examining the LA lockup, right, for the Dodgers. Using architectural impressions. Posters around subject matter. We're beginning to get sort of a whole archive of our own together to sort of mark these moments. So living in posterity means that your works will go on. A recent voter campaign designed by our students, reviewed at the Center for the Study of Political Graphics, which provides, it's a wonderful resource. Our capstone projects, as they are. When we were in lockdown, the work goes on. If anything, designers control the horizontal and the vertical. It's not a problem. But you got to come to class not in your pajamas. Okay? You got to have work on the wall behind you. You got to present. And these students did quite well, I thought, surviving. But it is wonderful to be teaching alongside my students. Here's some of the other projects and their installations. I'll just go through them. But current projects involve projects that are aimed at uniting against book bans. Taking those titles on and rethinking them. Renewing our commitment to the word in that regard. And so these are going to be traveling. We do it every year. We're in our third season. And it gives them an opportunity to test all of their chops in different ways, communication. We're also running another project which will explore the 17 Goals for Sustainable Development, the UN. Misha Tyler has done covers, illustrations for New Yorker magazine now. Yeah, life goes on. Monty Milhouse has presented at the most recent Adobe Next Gen conference in San Francisco. So there's a world right next door for you, for where you sit, even though you might not think so. We did this one already, right? Get off your phones. That's it. Did I make it? There's not much time. I don't think there's any time for questions. If there are, stick around.
Can we turn the lights on?
Dankeschön.
I know it's 6:10, but maybe we have a couple questions?
I have samples of pieces, takeaways for you as well, if you want to come on down. Such.
One question at least?
How long can I squat? I need to do this periodically, otherwise my knees will go out. What do you think?
Come on, you all. You got some questions for this amazing gentleman here. Yes?
What are some lessons that you learned working in the industry that you think that might not be obvious to people who are just starting out?
you got to do everything that crosses your desk. You know, I have an active practice that goes alongside with my social praxis. It is integral. One informs the other. Okay? And if you're not doing all of that, you are missing an opportunity to have your voice appear within industry. If anything, I think that that's the critical factor, is your own lexicon and inflections being applied in the world. So you're all going to be very successful. You're going to find your path. But what you want to do is to try to, well, you want to do whatever you want to do. That's up to you. But at the end of the day, if you look back over your career, you know, where are you in your work? That's the question. Hi.
From where you started in your graphic design journey, did you think you would work here?
No, I didn't. No, you just don't know. The path is a moment-to-moment process, and the aggregate of that path becomes a journey. And the best laid plans don't always pan out, you know. So you move forward one foot before the next, and you do things along the way. And over time, you will have a chance to step back and to reflect. This last several years has been a wonderful opportunity for me to sort of, this is what I've been doing. You know, so there's that part of it, but it does take a navigation right here. What moves you? If you're not following that, why are you doing it? That's my answer. It could be completely diametrical or different for someone else. Anybody else? Good questions. And notice I don't have answers. You have your own answers. Okay? And the heuristic method is to reframe the question, because the answer is in the question. My students get frickin' upset with me about that. You ask me, what do you want, professor? What do you want to do here? You know, I don't have that answer. What do you want to do with that? That's an opportunity. Those of you who are in the discovery phase of whatever discipline you're in, that's the turnaround, is to have all the questions reflected and to re-reflect on them. And the juxtaposition of those create new answers, I think. Do you have a question? Hi.
Was it me?
It's a row 7, I guess.
How do you deal with, like, when you can't answer those questions and, like, the frustration that goes on through the process of design?
It can be frustrating. You know what I discover is that 85% of the way through every project I've ever endeavored upon, I want to do something else. All I can say is resist that urge. Don't dump all the hard labor and forethought, because this is not about, the lesson from Armin is that it is about observation and discovering. You know, it is about, and reconsidering. It's not wrong. There is no wrong answer, right? That could be a different one, I think. What's that like for you? It's a challenge.
I'm still figuring out that answer.
Okay, it's not finite and it's not absolute.
I guess keep going.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going. But also have things of your own going on in tandem. Don't dump yourselves to do the job. You're not slaves. What is the middle ground between that? What is that opportunity for you to infuse into the work? And over time, you're going to see yourself in this. There'll be times for you to be very explicit and outspoken, where that's appropriate. Do you have a question? Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for sitting through all this. Come on down and get some swag if you want.
There's some postcards down here if anybody would like.
Please take them so that I don't have to take them with me.